So you decided to put in a water system, and one of the decisions that we've been asked is, should I go with a constant pressure system or a standard pressure system? Well, it's actually a very important decision that you need to make, but maybe we need to give you some information to help you make a good educated decision about where to go. First thing you need to think about is your pressure tank size. You can see 3 different size tanks here. This is your standard pressure tank. It's an 85-gallon tank. You see these a lot out in the country, out on your regular residential systems. They're good for up to about 15 gallons a minute on a standard pressure system. You get up above 15 gallons a minute, you're probably going to have to go to a 119-gallon tank. And this will carry you up 25, 30 gallons a minute. You start getting above that, we start having to put in multiple tanks to get you the pressure tank capacity that you need for a standard pressure system. Well, one of the benefits of a constant pressure system is that you get to use a small tank. This was a little 20-gallon tank. It's good for probably up to about 40, 45 gallons a minute. If you get above that, we do start going to a bigger size tank, but that's usually only on the commercial jobs where we need something that big. So this allows you to put a small tank somewhere discreet beside your house, by the air conditioning unit, in the garage, not taking up a lot of space of a big or even multiple tanks. Another thing that you need to consider is the pressure fluctuation. Your standard pressure is exactly what it sounds like. Your pressure is fluctuating 20 psi between on and off. For instance, typically most systems are set up on a 40-60 pressure switch. So this is an example of a pressure switch. The pump would start when the pressure gets down to about 40 psi and cut off when it gets to 60 psi. We can adjust that up and down a little bit, but you need to keep that 20 psi difference. But on the constant pressure system, the pressure is monitored by this pressure sensor screwed into the pipe, and it's got this wire that attaches to the controller. And it starts the pump when there's only a 5 psi drop. So you get very little fluctuation in your pressure. Kind of like city water pressure. You just hardly ever know, you never notice the pressure difference. So that's really, really good for keeping a constant pressure, especially for things like your irrigation or your shower. You know, that irrigation sprinkler head that's spraying, it's going to spray the same distance the entire time that it's running. It's not going to fluctuate like you would get on a standard pressure system. Now, one of the things you might say is, you know, I really don't want the pump starting that often with only a 5 psi differential. Well, you're exactly right. We are trying to protect our systems against having multiple starts. But one of the benefits of the constant pressure is you actually get less starts. Because once the pump is up and running, as long as you've got some demand, it'll continue to run and not shut off. Even if it's just turning really, really slow, pumping a little bit of water, that protects that pump against those starts. Where we have with the standard pressure system, we have a lot more starts of the pump. Typical system, here we see 40 starts a day, where on this type of system we'll see less than 20 starts a day. This system is easier on the pump. This has what's called a soft start. It takes about 2.5 seconds for the pump to get up to full speed. Where this system, it takes only 1/10 of a second for the pump to get up to full speed. So once again, that's kind of like grandma driving the car. She's easy on the gas, easing into it, where over here we have the teenager that's got a hard braking, hard hitting on the gas pedal with a hard start. Shorter life of the pump, longer life of the pump, simply because of those hard starts. On the constant pressure system, we have great diagnostics that are built into the controllers. They watch the power supply to make sure that it's good. They watch the pump to make sure it doesn't run out of water. They're watching the pressure tank to make sure that it's not going to waterlog or something like that for you. And if anything goes wrong, it shuts it off, gives you a blinking light, tells you exactly what's going on. On the standard pressure system, it's a little more crude. We've got some overloads that are built into it that'll protect the pump against burning up, things like that. For things like the pump being bound from, locking up or things like that. But they're not going to protect against other things. So what we typically do to get around that is we'll add a pump saver into this unit that will protect against those things like bad power supply, running out of water, things like that. And in another video, we'll talk about pump savers and how they work and how we like to use them. Cost is a big thing on these controllers, though. You got to understand that the cost of this controller is about 1/10 the cost of this controller. So this controller can run you thousands of dollars, and that sometimes can add to a pretty expensive bill when you're talking about replacing these controllers. And the longevity of the constant pressure systems is not as long. Average life probably around 10 years, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less, depending on your type of controller and your situation. Where the standard controller, we see an average life 15, 20 years. And with the lower cost to replace it, it makes sense sometimes. One of the biggest things that you need to think about when you're choosing this is what type of power supply you have. If you're in downtown Austin, you've got really, really good power supply. We really don't have much of a problem with these constant pressure controllers. But the further out in the country we go, the further down the power line we get, where we start getting trashy power, these constant pressure controllers can give us some nuisance shutdowns for the power supply not being so great. So think about these two systems, the benefits, the pros and cons, bigger tank, smaller tank, better controller, smaller controller, and choose a system that works for your situation. If you have any questions about which one we suggest for your situation, give us a call. We can walk you through it and help you choose the right system for your situation.